Hi, today we'll be making an animated eye roll emote of a raven. This is going to be a continuing part of a set. I sketched the raven and brought it into Adobe Fresco to do the vector work. I turned on symmetry as it is a head-on sketch. I'm going to go ahead and do a rough draft of the vector lines, and then knock the opacity down and do a final draft. You'll notice as I do this that I'm going to take advantage of one of my favorite pieces in here, which is the vector trimming. So I'm not going to worry too much about the lines on the hat and all of the intersections. I can work nice and fast and have it be cleaned up easily afterwards. The streamer this is for loves the color purple, and her name is Raven. So therefore, she has a set of emotes that we're working on that are all ravens, and they all have this cute little purple hat. I think it's quite cozy, and she quite likes it. Currently, her emotes are a set of really cute little purple monsters. We're replacing them by going back to ravens, which she tried at the beginning, but we didn't really have time to sit down and work on the full emote set. So they were a little disjointed and we purchased some. They weren't really quite what we wanted. So now we're going to go ahead and get a full set that's all completely matching. Once these lines are all done, I pull up another one of her emotes and take the colors from it. This is her wave emote. I do end up with a little rogue dot in here, as you can see on the screen. So I eventually have to hunt that down, find the layer it's on, and clean that up. And the dot is gone. Working with all the highlights and shadows comes next. Because this is an emote, it calls for a more cel shading approach to the highlights and shadows than a normal painting would. That way it shows up a lot better when it's really small. It's really easy to lose the details. You want to keep everything nice and readable at a small size. I'm just going to go ahead and finish these up here. As I do this, I realize that at some point I accidentally flooded the background of the image with the pale purple. Now, I have not been well for several months now. I make quite a few more mistakes than I used to. If you find that this happens to you, don't stress or be upset. Just get creative with fixing things. Sometimes it's hard to determine where the highlights and the shadows need to go. I don't know if you've ever looked at a raven and tried to figure out where the highlight on a beak when they're facing directly toward you would be. we're going to end up with some little blue highlights along the outside of the feathers. This kind of helps it stand away from a solid black background. When you have light colors against the black background, they show up easy enough. But when you're dealing with a gray raven, you want to try and give as many little breaks between that and the background that you can. So I actually end up fixing this the long way by drawing an outline and then filling outside of that. A reference layer would have worked even better for this, but you know, fatigue makes some silly decisions sometimes. Because I want the background to actually be transparent, I set the opacity of the color I'm filling with to 0%, which floods with a transparent fill. Now we're ready for the animation. This is actually a replacement for an existing emote that she has, where the little monster starts with a headshot, zooms in, and then rolls the eyes. So we're going to do that with the raven as well. One of the first things I do is create a new layer and put a little yellow dot right at the top of the nose. I have a grid on, and I notice exactly where the nose is in relation to that grid. So now every time I do a new layer, I can line that dot up. One of the hardest things I find on any kind of animation where I'm trying to zoom something in is to make sure that I keep it from moving side to side or up and down when it shouldn't. So that little dot really helps me align things. It's born out of desperation. Then you can just go ahead and remove that top layer when you're done. So we're going to inch in slowly on the close-up, realigning that dot to the same spot of the grid each time. As I do the eyes, I leave the whites of the eyes unpainted because on a previous attempt, I had a horrible time with it dragging color around. So we'll fill those in at the end. As I started the animation, I set the onion skin to just one frame. This allows you to see what you have done in the prior and next frames, so you can make small changes for frame-by-frame animation. You'll see the purple overlay on mine for one direction and green for the other. You could change these colors and the opacity of your onion skins if you desire. This is one of the reasons I find Fresco a lot easier, because the animation takes place on every single layer, instead of in Procreate where you have the layers as the actual frames. Because I can't really use Fresco's fun animation shortcuts to do both the zoom and the eye roll, I had to choose to do a manual frame-by-frame animation for this. If you hide the artboard preview, you can see exactly where you are on the frame. I use this at one point as I start to get close to the end of the zoom in, so I can make sure that I haven't gone too far and that I have gone far enough. Once we're done zooming in, it's time to start rotating the eyes. Selecting one eyeball and then the other, I start duplicating the frame and then transforming. You may notice that if you have a selection, a transform will now come up on the menu at the bottom. Fresco also retains your selection at the end of each step, making it very easy to get the movement plotted. Once the eyeballs point up, we make the raven look directly ahead again, and that's the end of the eye roll. After a quick test of the animation, it's time to sample the eye color of the existing emote to start filling them in frame by frame. I turn off the onion skin because I don't need to reference the other layers at this point, and it just makes it a little bit clearer what the color is. All done. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this enjoyable. Please feel to leave any questions or comments. Be kind to yourself and others, and I hope you have a wonderful week.